This is CommonWell TV, where we're interviewing some of the top health IT industry experts and finding out how their organizations are assisting in interoperability. Time now to hear from MITRE and their chief clinical lead, that is Dr. Brian Anderson. And Dr. Anderson, as you know, CommonWell and other interoperability groups, they were initially created to fulfill a need within that health IT industry. How do you see that now evolving as new data exchanges emerge?
I think one of the really exciting areas that everyone has begun to realize is going to be an incredible moment for scaling when it comes to interoperability is the patient. The atomic unit of health has always been and will always be about the patient. And, I think one of the greatest misconceptions about health interoperability groups like CommonWell is that, it's about the provider or the health system or vendors creating technology to support interoperability. But with the new regulations coming down, it is very clear that the patient, as a consumer of their own health data, as an owner of their own health data, will be front and center for the next years to come. And CommonWell's role that it plays in helping to bring together groups that are aligned around that to facilitate patients owning and accessing their own data will be incredibly powerful. So I'm really excited about that. I think MITRE is very excited to play a part of that, both as we work with our federal sponsors and as we work with the vendor community to enable patients in that way.
Brian, do you think it's possible for there to be one common standard for diseases such as cancer that can be implemented nationally?
I do. I think that a lot of the work being done in the interop standard area is incremental. And so some of the work that MITRE is helping to lead in the oncology space benefits from the work that teams like those in the fire accelerators for Da Vinci are doing with payers, or the teams in the vendor space with the Argonaut community have done. They have laid the foundation for new fire accelerators like Codex and communities like the M-Code community to come together to establish disease-specific standards for interoperability that are enabling, in the case of cancer, a patient's cancer story or their cancer record to be made semantically interoperable. And as we know in oncology, a patient's journey through that space often involves moving from their primary care physician to their clinical oncologist, and maybe their surgical oncologist, and maybe their radiation oncologist. And so there's a lot of need for a patient's data specifically tied to cancer to be made interoperable. And so what does that mean? That means bringing together that community of clinicians, of researchers, of health systems that want to help facilitate that to make that more real, right? And so if we're aligned around the patient and improving that patient's care, it's easier to bring together the competing interests of health systems and vendors to identify what that common standard is and to make it into a semantically interoperable model, and then to implement it. And so that's part of the work, certainly that MITRE is doing in this space. I believe it's possible, or else I wouldn't be doing it. And we're getting traction in that area, so we're excited.
So, Brian, how would that data standard, along with a common language, really support interoperability? And then what sort of barriers do you see?
So let me give you an example. It's a great question. So part of the standard in the oncology space is focused around specific use cases. So we didn't develop a standard for the sake of just making a data dictionary. We developed it with specific end use in mind. And so the first end use case is around clinical research. We said, for providers that are enrolling patients and patients that are enrolled as part of clinical trials, we want to identify a model that enables patients' data to be captured seamlessly in a low-burden way by a provider as part of that clinical trial to overcome the challenge that exists not only in cancer clinical research, but across the board. In most clinical research studies, they're only applicable to 3% of the people. And so, the burdens to enroll into finding a clinical trial to be enrolled in, to enrolling in one, to having access to an academic medical center that has that trial are real challenges. Having a health system that is willing to adopt a data model like MCODE, or maybe there's going to be one in cardiology soon, where it facilitates the use case of capturing the data for the clinical research purpose, enables health systems to have a more efficient way, optimized way of conducting clinical research. It enables pharmaceutical companies to run clinical trials in a more efficient way. And it enables federal entities like the FDA to have a more efficient and real-world data-driven methodology to make their regulatory decisions on the data being submitted as part of that clinical research. So part of it is, or I should say that the big part of it is identifying the use case that can bring together the whole community. So the challenges, though, are competing standards, the inherent nature of competition between pharmaceutical companies and health systems, the vendors. Oftentimes there's a challenge in engaging vendors around a common standard because they have their own intellectual property. And so there's some systems in place in the health domain that wouldn't be a surprise to anyone that create challenges in building trust around a common model. MITRE's specific role that we're trying to occupy is one of being a trusted advisor that doesn't have any conflict of interest. So, that's what we're hoping to accomplish, have it be use case driven, build trust, create models that have real impact and that are implemented for those specific use cases.
Well, I know you guys are excited about taking on those challenges head on as MITRE, along with Dr. Brian Anderson, a great partnership with CommonWell. For more information on MITRE, along with everything else that the CommonWell Alliance has to offer, we invite you to log on to commonwellalliance.org. Good to see you again, Dr. Anderson.
Good to see you too.